If you use the Florida ACES residential contract, you need more than a fill-in-the-blank approach. This form creates binding rights, deadlines, and risk the moment it becomes effective. The safest way to complete it is to understand both what each section says and how the whole transaction flows from acceptance through closing. This is not only to protect you, but also your clients. Start with the parties. Make sure the buyer and seller names match how they should legally appear in the transaction, because a sloppy name entry can create signature and title problems later. If it is going into a company name, make sure you get the proper paperwork. Then confirm the property details carefully. The street address helps identify the home, but the legal description and parcel information are what tie the contract to the exact real estate being sold. If the contract calls for the tax ID or folio information, verify it against reliable records instead of copying from memory, marketing remarks, or an old listing sheet. We recommend using IMAP or Realist if available. Be just as specific with personal property. List what stays, note what does not, and do not assume a refrigerator, chandelier, or mounted television is included unless the contract clearly says so. The contract does not specifically mention washer and dryer. In the financial section, begin with the total purchase price and make sure every related amount supports that number all the way through the contract. Next, spell out the deposit structure. If there is an initial deposit and an additional deposit, each amount and due timing should be complete and easy for the escrow agent to follow. Generally on finance transactions, we do a 1% deposit of the purchase price. So $200,000 home would be a $2,000 deposit. Cash transactions can yield up to 5%. The larger the escrow, the more you risk if the buyer defaults, so keep that in mind. Escrow instructions matter. Identify the escrow agent correctly, include where the deposit goes, and watch for incomplete delivery terms that leave everyone guessing about who is holding the money. Generally, the seller picks title and escrow. If the buyer is financing, enter the financed amount accurately and confirm the balance to close still works mathematically. One unchecked box or missing escrow detail can derail performance and create avoidable conflict. Before moving on, reconcile every dollar. Agents should be able to explain where the purchase price comes from, how much is deposited, how much is finance, and what remains due at closing. One of the most important concepts in this contract is the effective date. That is the date the final party signs and communicates acceptance, and many other deadlines run from there. This is considered day zero of the contract. So if today is a Wednesday, today would be day 0, making Thursday day 1, Friday day 2, Saturday day 3, and so on. Be careful not to confuse an offer date, a signature date, and an effective date. If you misidentify that trigger point, your inspection, financing, and notice deadlines can all be off. The closing date is not just a calendar entry. It affects lender coordination, title work, prorations, possession planning, and the parties' expectations about when the deal must be completed. On a finance deal, you ideally want at least 30 days to close due to multiple circumstances. It is also to communicate with their lender to see what is ideal. Occupancy and possession deserve special attention. If the buyer is not getting possession at closing, or the seller will remain after closing, that change often requires added documentation and risk planning. Assignability matters too. Whether a buyer may assign the contract can affect who ultimately performs and should never be left unexplained when the structure of the deal makes it important. If a buyer wants to assign a property, especially an investment, it could be a sign they are a wholesaler and not actually intending on buying the home. Financing terms change the entire rhythm of the deal. A cash transaction removes loan contingency steps, while a finance purchase adds approval periods, lender coordination, and more opportunities for deadlines to be missed. If it is left blank, it is considered 30 days. If you are outside of that window and the buyer cannot get financed, they will lose their escrow deposit. When the contract includes financing, confirm the loan type and the amount the buyer expects to borrow. Those details should match the buyer's actual plan, not a guess made before lender review. Pay close attention to the loan approval period. That window is where the buyer works toward approval, and the agent should calendar it immediately from the effective date. Appraisal issues can also affect the path to closing. If the transaction uses appraisal-related terms or addenda, make sure the contract reflects exactly how an appraisal shortfall will be handled. Notice obligations are where agents often get into trouble. If the contract requires buyer notice by a certain deadline, and that notice is late or missing, the buyer may lose a protection they expected to have. Treat lender updates like deadline management, not casual conversation. Document requests, follow up early, and never assume silence from the lender means the contingency is safely on track. Now let's move into the sections that affect condition, title, and closing expenses. These clauses shape what each party must deliver before the sale can close. Review the closing cost allocations carefully instead of relying on custom in your market. The contract controls and small cost items can still create dispute when the parties expected something different. Title and survey provisions also need close attention. Agents should know who is responsible for title evidence, whether survey issues matter in the deal, and when title objections must be addressed. Special assessments and required disclosures are another area where facts matter. Check the current status with the association or seller disclosures, and do not leave these items to assumption. Seller maintenance obligations continue during the contract period. Even in an as-is deal, the seller still has responsibilities. An as-is does not mean the contract ignores damage, access, or required disclosure duties. The inspection period is one of the most misunderstood parts of this form. As-is means the seller is not agreeing in the contract to make repairs, but the buyer still has inspection rights and may cancel within the inspection period if the contract allows it. Any repairs need to be negotiated during this period or risk the buyer having to pay to rectify them. Toward the back of the contract, the clauses may feel more technical, but this is where the operating rules of the deal really live. Notice delivery matters because rights are often preserved only if notice is sent the right way and on time. Agents should know what methods the contract allows and keep proof of delivery. Time is of the essence means deadlines are real deadlines, not rough targets. Add force majeure, prorations, and risk of loss to your review, because each clause can affect closing if something unexpected happens. Understand the importance if dates end on a weekend or holiday. This is a game changer. Default and dispute provisions explain what may happen if a party fails to perform. They also shape exposure around deposits, enforcement, and possible attorney's fees. The practical habit that protects agents most is simple. Calendar every deadline, document every notice, and never wait until the last day to find out whether a condition has really been satisfied. The main contract is only part of the file. Many transactions need addenda, so the written terms actually match the property type, financing structure, and occupancy facts. Think first about property and community issues. Condo and homeowners association transactions often require extra terms, disclosures, or review periods that should not be forced into blank lines. Then look at deal structure, financing, appraisal, insurance, seller occupancy after closing, buyer occupancy before closing, or a sale of buyer's property contingency can all call for additional documents. Some deals raise even more specific issues, like vacation rental use, lead-based paint for older homes, or attorney approval language. The right addendum depends on the facts, not on habit. When you are unsure, slow down and get guidance. Agents should match addenda to the transaction and bring in the broker, attorney, title team, or closing professional when legal interpretation is needed. When you work with the Florida as-is contract, your job is to complete every blank carefully, verify every fact, and make sure the form matches the actual deal in front of you. Track every timeline from the effective date, use the right addenda for the situation, and involve attorneys and closing professionals whenever the transaction needs legal or technical guidance. Being thorough reduces the risk to you, our firm, and the buyer. As always, look to management for support to review for accuracy and completeness.